Welcome to another episode of Infographic Instant with Brian Michael. In this episode, we'll be asking which emerging markets offer the richest potential markets for leasing and factoring finance. For those of us who aren't very familiar with these less known forms of shadow banking, leasing finance basically refers to a company, a financial institution, having a lot of money. They will buy the asset and then lease it to the potential user. Thus, instead of just giving the money directly to the potential user of the asset, they will put themselves in the middle of this chain between the producer, seller, and the user, buyer, in order to use the capital they have at hand in order to make a rate of return. Factoring, on the other hand, refers to taking accounts receivable, bills that you're owed, and selling them off at a slight discount, based, of course, on the time, on the expected risk of collection, and so forth. Thus, these two methods of finance provide a very interesting and very important adjunct to banking, and particularly shadow banking in emerging markets. So where are the opportunities for financial institutions or wannabe financial institutions who want to put their money into these two types of financial transactions? Well, what we show in this infographic is what economists know as an efficient frontier. And the efficient frontier, or just frontier, refers to those best-in-class countries, companies, those countries that have the most amount of factoring to GDP and the most amount of leasing to GDP in the case that we're looking at. So what we've shown is we've shown Chile and South Africa as the two basic leaders in terms of extending these two types of finance relative to their national GDP. And then we ask the question, well, where are the other emerging dozen, as we call them in the report? Well, there is a group of countries that appear to be slowly converging to the efficient frontier, and those are large, fast-growing countries such as Turkey, Brazil, to a lesser extent Saudi Arabia, and those are countries that have seen increases in both their leasing and factoring to GDP. And we also show a likely what's called adjustment path. The adjustment path, which is in gray, basically shows the likely evolution, or the way that leasing to GDP and factoring to GDP will increase over time, assuming that financial institutions in these countries extend this kind of financing activity more often and at much larger volumes. There are a third group of countries that you can read about in the report, and these are the laggers. These are the countries that have less than 1–2% of GDP in these types of financing. And thus it doesn't look like the amount of financing they will give in the near future is very promising. However, we have to keep two perspectives in mind when we look at both these very small financing companies and these medium-sized financing countries like Turkey that are slowly moving to the efficient frontier. In the incompetence theory of shadow banking, for lack of a better word, this sees these laggard countries as lagging for a reason. There's something in the laws, there's something in the social relationships, there's something in the company, the way companies are incorporated, or the way that judicial systems work. There's something about these companies that there's something about these countries that prevent their companies from engaging in large amounts of factoring and large amounts of lease financing. Therefore, in this incompetence view, these countries will just never go to the efficient frontier. Aspiring shadow bankers should just ignore these countries altogether. In the second view, the upstart view, This sees these countries as slowly adopting best regulation, best methods of operating financial institutions. And so the upstart theory says, okay, well, these countries have lagged behind. Indonesia has lagged for many years. However, as they modernize very quickly, we expect to see them approach very quickly the sufficient frontier that we've drawn in the infographic. And if you are an upstart shadow banker, if you believe in this upstart theory, then you'll want to put your money in these very underdeveloped markets, because you believe that they will hop on this adjustment path very quickly. And by hopping on the adjustment path very quickly, of course, that means that the initial amount of money you put into starting up a factoring finance company will treble, quadruple, will increase very, very rapidly over time. And imagine if you're sitting in Indonesia starting a factoring finance company that is less than 0.5% of GDP, and suddenly it goes into best in practice, efficient frontier levels of financing at 4 or 5% of GDP, even higher in some developed OECD economies, then you will be extremely rich indeed. And therefore, the whole point of becoming a wannabe shadow banker in these economies is to understand whether the country you're dealing in is an incompetence theory country or an upstart country. And we describe this more in the paper, which we hope you will read. This has been another infographic instant with Brian Michael.